For those who didn't know, Visual Studio Code supports working with Jupyter Notebooks natively and through Python code files. So for anyone who would like to, I'm just going to take you through the basics of setting up a Jupyter Notebook and managing that notebook within Visual Studio Code. So first up then, let's go over to the extensions here and search for Jupyter. You can see that I've already found it. So just type in Jupyter. That will then give you a nice little list, and hopefully one of them will be this here, Jupyter by Microsoft. And this provides us Jupyter Notebook support. One of the benefits of utilizing Jupyter Notebook inside Visual Studio Code, we get the best of both worlds, Jupyter and all the tools provided by the IDE. I have used this extension quite extensively, and it's fair to say, as you can see from the reviews here, that it isn't quite flawless in how it works. If you're being quite expansive with your code, you'll find maybe that you will have some problems. It might be a little bit hit and miss, but it's definitely worth having a go if you wanted to integrate Jupyter Notebooks within Visual Studio Code. So two ways we can start utilizing Jupyter Notebooks once we've installed that extension is we can just start creating files. So here, let's just go ahead and create a new file. And that, of course, is going to need the IPYNB file extension. And straight away, you can see as soon as you created that new file, we then have the interface which correlates to Jupyter Notebooks. In addition, you can just go over to, and you can't see this, into view there and open up your command palette. You can use the shortcut, of course. And then from here, we can also now utilize the command. So if we type in Jupyter, you can see that we've got a number of different pre-created commands. So new notebook, and we're off. So just press save, and then we can save it wherever we need to save it. So two ways of creating a new notebook. So if you are completely new to this game, you are going to need Python installed. So if you haven't already installed Python, you're going to need to install Python on your machine to get this working, of course. So once you have installed Python, typically in your notebook, you'll probably want to utilize a virtual environment or work within a virtual environment. And depending on whether you're using Windows or Mac, will depend on how that is set up. There are some tutorials, if you have a look in the channel, not too long ago from this tutorial, where I take you through that process on Windows and Mac. So here in Mac, we can type, and it's similar on Windows. Once you've installed Python, of course, we're going to just set up a simple virtual environment. So that's pretty much the same command on Windows and Mac. And then in Mac, I type in source, or on Windows, you're just going to type in \venv. So source, and then source, and the venv. I've used tab there to finish that off. And then on Mac, it's going to be bin and activate. On Windows, it's going to be scripts, and then activate. So that's going to be the slight difference there, Windows and Mac. So once that's activated, you can now go ahead and install all your dependencies or requirements. So once you have got your virtual machine, you'll want to kind of connect that to your Jupyter Notebook, if you like. So here up top, we can select the kernel. So you can see what we've got here is a list of different Python maybe versions you have on your machine. And at the bottom here, it says venv. So you can see this folder structure to this new venv, to this new virtual environment where Python is installed. And of course, potentially we want to work within that environment because that's how we've set up our environment here. We want to work within our virtual environment. So we need to select that. And now we're working from or within that virtual environment with our notebook. So here we have a cell. And you can see that if I hover over the top or the bottom of the cell, you can see we have two options here. I can create a new cell, or I can create a new markdown cell, if you like. So here I can type in typical kind of markdown. So new notebook. And then once you've done, press the tick, and you can see that then that creates the markdown. And that can be done within or in between each of the cells, the code cells that you're creating. And these cells are really easy to work with. If we hover over them or click on them, we can edit or, of course, delete them. So it's very easy to work with these cells. So you can see from the top nav here, the type of commands that we have available. So typically working with this, let's just go for some simple code. So we've got two cells here with code. So we'll just go ahead and print hello and then world. So you can see we've got run all to run everything. We're asked here to install running cells in Python requires package, so we need to install. So we'll just go ahead and install that. This is kind of synonymous of utilizing this tool within Visual Studio Code. It does provide us these tips here in terms of what packages we might need to install. So you can see that runs, and you can see the output below. So we can clear all the outputs of the cell. We've got some additional options here to clear the cell outputs. So let's just go ahead and clear them. You can see that we can run the cell individually by utilizing this left run icon or the execute cell icon. And there's some more handy features over on the right hand side here. We can export this into HTML, Python script, or PDF. So some nice little tools there on the menu. So like I alluded to at the start, it's not perfect. Sometimes what happens, I find that the code just takes way too long to execute, and then I find myself utilizing the interrupt to stop the process quite often. But again, it depends how expansively you utilize this. I think that if you are starting to learn code, this does provide some great tools to kind of break down components, make it more manageable, to make some simple notes or some simple scripts that you can utilize later in your code. Ultimately, you're just going to be balancing up the pros and cons here on how this performs for you. So in terms of managing the cells here, there's quite a few options. So we can drag and change position of the cells. On the right hand side here, we've got a number of different options. Change cell to markdown, that can be pretty handy. Show what I normally turn on the actual line codes, that's pretty handy too, because typically if you do get errors, it does define what line the error is on, so that can definitely be handy. So where this might have issues with is with other extensions installed potentially. That's where probably maybe some of the issues might resolve from. But I find generally the extensions that I use, for example, Python, that works well with the notebooks, and you can see that you kind of get the best of both worlds here in that it provides all the kind of IntelliSense and the normal options you would get from the other extensions that you have installed. If you are working in a very structured way, something that's quite handy is the outline. So let me just go ahead and say let's go to step 1, for example. So I want to do that just close that. Let's go ahead and Markdown. I want to use Markdown here. So we do a little of that, and we go into the outline. You can see here we have step 1. So this kind of gives you a nice way of generating some content. So again, let's just go for step 2 here and then press OK. And you can see that that's going to produce a nice little outline, and that's going to allow us to easily navigate through the workbook as it becomes a little bit more expansive. In addition to these features, moving forward, maybe you want to start, for example, variable watching. So we can access variables and other information here. Once you start working with data, for example, rendering plots, you will find that they will get rendered under the cell, and you can go ahead and easily save them in different formats. So I do get quite a lot of questions about what tools are you using, what extensions are you using. So this type of tutorial really is for me to point people towards these tutorials when I do get asked those questions, so that they can start to have a look at the tools that I'm using and also how to start using them. So I do hope there was some value there for you. Any questions, any queries, any problems, just leave a comment in the description, and I hope to see you in another tutorial.